Okay, let's set the scene. It's June 16th, 2025. Nicosia, Cyprus. You've got this palpable diplomatic buzz in the air, flags, dignitaries, the whole setup.
Exactly. And right there, Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulides is about to present Cyprus's absolute highest civilian honor.
And the person receiving it,
Yeah.
India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. The award itself sounds pretty prestigious, the Grand Cross of the Order of Makarios III.
It really is. Named after their first president, Archbishop Makarios III, it's typically reserved for heads of state, people who've made, truly exceptional international contributions.
But here's the kicker, the bit that really caught our attention. This award, this specific one from Cyprus, makes Prime Minister Modi the Indian leader with the most international honors ever bestowed by foreign nations.
That's right. The tally hits 28. 28 major international awards between 2016 and just now 2025.
28 in under a decade.
Yeah,
It's a remarkable number.
It absolutely is. I mean, just for context, think about India's first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. He received 2 such international awards in his entire time. Indira Gandhi, also 2.
So 28 compared to 2. It's a completely different league.
Unprecedented for an Indian leader, certainly in terms of volume and speed.
Which leads us straight into our deep dive today. What is actually going on here? What does this huge wave of global recognition really mean? Why are all these different countries lining up to give their highest honors? And ultimately, what does it tell us about India's place in the world right now?
We've gathered quite a bit of material on this, looking at the awards, the context, the reactions.
Right, so let's unpack it, starting with that most recent one, the one that tipped the record, Cyprus.
Yeah, let's zero in on Nicosia, the Grand Cross of the Order of Makarios III. You said it's a big deal, named after their first president.
It carries immense weight domestically in Cyprus. It's a powerful symbol, signaling deep respect and a recognition of significant international contribution.
And Modi's reaction, according to the reports we saw,
he dedicated it not really to himself, but to India's 1.4 billion people. And he talked about the everlasting friendship between India and Cyprus. It's a familiar framing, right? Connecting personal honor back to the nation and the bilateral relationship.
It is, but the Cyprus angle itself is quite fascinating, geopolitically speaking. Cyprus is, well, it's navigating some tricky regional dynamics, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean.
So honoring Modi isn't just about pleasantries.
Likely not just pleasantries. For Cyprus, honoring the leader of a major rising power like India sends a message. It signals that they see India as a reliable, stable partner, a partner that champions principles like sovereignty and dialogue principles that are, frankly, very important to Cyprus given its own situation.
Okay, so it's a strategic alignment, a way for Cyprus to bolster its position by publicly embracing a significant global player.
Precisely. It's smart diplomacy on their part. But as you said, Cyprus is just the latest one, number 28.
Let's talk about that number 28. It's not just the quantity, where you mentioned the speed, but also the spread.
Exactly. 28 is impressive on its own, especially compared to past leaders. But it's the who and where that tells a bigger story. These aren't participation trophies. They're often the highest civilian, sometimes military, honors a nation can bestow, or major awards from bodies like the UN.
So paint a picture for us. Where are these awards coming from? You said it's global.
It really is. Looking through the list is genuinely striking. We're talking the Middle East, Europe, Africa, the Pacific Islands, the Americas, plus international organizations. It covers almost every corner of the globe.
Okay, let's hear some examples. Give us a flavor of this diversity.
Right, let's go back a bit. 2016, Afghanistan gives him the Amir Amanullah Khan Award. The stated reason: strengthening India-Afghanistan ties, think infrastructure, humanitarian aid.
Okay, a key neighbor.
Same year, 2016, Saudi Arabia. He receives the King Abdulaziz Sash. This was linked to deepening the India-Saudi relationship. Energy deals, counterterrorism cooperation were mentioned.
Right, important relationships there. What else?
Jump to 2018. Palestine awards the Grand Collar of the State of Palestine. Significance: he was the first Indian PM to visit, and the award acknowledged his efforts in promoting India-Palestine relations.
A significant diplomatic first.
Also in 2018, something quite different. The United Nations Champions of the Earth Award. This was specifically for his leadership on the International Solar Alliance and pushing sustainable development.
So global environmental leadership recognized.
And South Korea, same year with the Seoul Peace Prize. Their citation pointed to contributions to global peace and economic growth, modonomics, as they called it.
Wow, okay. Diplomacy, environment, economics. Quite a range just in that 1 year.
And it keeps going. 2019, Russia presents the Order of St. Andrew the Apostle, their highest state order. Why? Boosting India-Russia strategic ties, cooperation in defense, space.
A major global power relationship.
Then the UAE, 2019, the Order of Zayed, their top civilian honor, again, strengthening bilateral ties, trade, investment highlighted. Bahrain, also in 2019, the King Hamad Order of the Renaissance, coinciding with his first visit as PM.
So a clear focus on consolidating ties in the Gulf region as well.
Absolutely. Move to 2020, Bhutan bestows the Order of the Drink Gyalpo. What's really interesting here is that he was the first foreign leader ever to receive it. It was a recognition of India's consistent support for Bhutan's development.
That's quite something, being the first foreigner.
It is. And also, 2020, the United States awards the Legion of Merit. This is a high U.S. military decoration given to foreign figures, and it was specifically for elevating the India-U.S. strategic partnership defense deals, closer alignment.
So from the closest neighbors to major global partners like the U.S. and Russia, the spectrum is wide.
Incredibly wide. Then you have 2023, which was dubbed a hat-trick year in some reports because he received 3 major ones.
Huh?
Papua New Guinea gave him the Grand Companion of the Order of Logohu during a summit there.
Papua New Guinea. Interesting. Why?
They specifically mentioned his efforts in strengthening ties with Pacific Island nations and, very significantly, his role in championing the voice of the Global South. Their leader apparently called him the leader of the Global South.
Okay, that Global South angle seems important. We're talking about developing nations, often in Asia, Africa, Latin America, Oceania.
Exactly. Their collective voice is gaining prominence. Then, still in 2023, Egypt awarded him the Order of the Nile, their highest state honor, citing leadership in global peace and cooperation.
Egypt, another key player connecting regions.
And then France. President Macron presented the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor, France's highest award, both civilian and military. He was the first Indian PM to get it. This reflected broad, deepening cooperation defense deals like the Rafale jets, space, culture, you name it.
Just that year covers the Pacific, Africa, Europe, highlighting very different aspects of India's engagement.
And it didn't stop. 2024 saw, based on our material, honors from Algeria, Kuwait, Dominica, Guyana, Barbados, and Palau. Quite a list for 1 year.
Dominica and Guyana. Any specific reasons mentioned there?
Yes, the reports specifically highlighted India's vaccine Maitri initiative supplying COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic. That support for healthcare and education was explicitly mentioned as a reason for the honors from Dominica and Guyana.
Ah, the vaccine diplomacy. That had clearly made a significant impact, especially with smaller nations.
It seems so. And then just earlier this year, March 2025, Mauritius bestowed the Grand Commander of the Order of the Star and Key of the Indian Ocean, the first Indian to receive it. This recognized the very close historical, cultural, and population ties and India's role as a partner.
And you're saying this is still just a selection? Because the material we looked at also mentioned Fiji, Palau, others you listed, Nigeria, Kuwait, Guyana, Barbados.
That's right. The full list gets us to that number 28.
Yeah.
It really paints a picture of sustained, broad-based international engagement being recognized across the board.
Which inevitably brings us back to the big why. Why now? Why this leader? Why this sheer volume of top-tier awards? It can't just be coincidence, surely.
No, definitely not coincidence. When you piece together the information, it points towards a confluence of factors. Part of it seems to be about Prime Minister Modi's specific approach to foreign policy, what's often described as very proactive, personalized diplomacy, building direct relationships with leaders.
So a personal leadership style component.
That seems to be part of the narrative presented. But perhaps the bigger factor, the underlying driver, is India itself. Its growing economic heft, its expanding military capabilities, its sheer demographic weight. India is increasingly seen and acknowledged as a major global player. Not just a regional power, but a global one.
And the awards are often tied to concrete actions you mentioned.
Yes, very much so. They aren't just abstract acknowledgments. Think of the UN Award for the International Solar Alliance, the vaccine diplomacy examples, the recognition from Papua New Guinea for championing the Global South. The awards seem to often follow specific initiatives or visible diplomatic stances.
It also seems to reflect India's ability, or at least its strategy, to maintain relationships across different, sometimes competing power blocks. Engaging deeply with the U.S. while also maintaining ties with Russia, strengthening links with Europe, the Gulf, and smaller nations simultaneously.
That balancing act, often termed multi-alignment, is definitely a key feature of India's current foreign policy, and these awards seem to reflect its perceived success, at least from the perspective of the awarding countries. They see India as a significant partner worth cultivating, regardless of its other relationships.
And this involves strategic planning, choreographed visits, big initiatives announced.
Absolutely. Major initiatives like the proposed India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or UMEE, often involve significant diplomatic groundwork and high-level visits. These awards can be seen as markers or perhaps even facilitators of these deepening strategic alignments.
Okay, let's loop back quickly to Cyprus then. With this broader context in mind, what does that specific award, number 28, signify beyond just adding to the count?
Well, it really underscores that strategic dimension we talked about. Cyprus, because of its location in the Eastern Mediterranean, could be a crucial node, a potential gateway for something like the IMEC connecting India towards Europe.
Ah, I see. So for Cyprus, honoring Modi isn't just about acknowledging India's global rise in general. It's potentially about positioning themselves advantageously within India's specific strategic projects.
Exactly. It's presented as mutually beneficial. Cyprus gets the backing and validation of a major global power, one that champions sovereignty, very relevant for them. India potentially gets a key partner, a foothold, in a strategically vital region connecting Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Plus, you have those mentions of ancient civilizational ties, which adds a sort of cultural resonance to the strategic logic.
So these 28 awards, taken together, are more than just personal accolades for a leader. They seem to mirror India's own changing image on the world stage, moving away from old perceptions towards being seen as a confident force in tech, trade, diplomacy, strategy.
I think that's a fair assessment based on the material. You see it reflected in initiatives India champions, like the ISA or the Digital India Push, its hosting of the G20 summit. These awards are, in a way, international endorsements of this transformation and India's more assertive global posture.
Okay, let's bring this right down to the listener. You might be hearing this and thinking, all right, 28 awards, global recognition, strategic partnerships, but why should I care? How does this affect me?
And that's a perfectly valid question. The argument often made is that this kind of high-level diplomacy and global standing isn't just abstract. It can potentially translate into tangible benefits back home.
How so?
Well, stronger international relationships can lead to more favorable trade deals, which could mean more economic activity, maybe even jobs. Increased foreign investment, often discussed during these visits, could fuel infrastructure projects or growth in certain industries. And generally, greater global respect can give India more influence in international forums on issues that affect everyone: climate change, security, global health.
So potential downstream economic and strategic benefits.
That's the argument. Of course, there's always the counter perspective, which also comes up in commentary.
Right. The idea that while the leader is collecting awards overseas, there are pressing issues at home that need attention. Potholes, grocery bills, the everyday stuff.
Exactly. That perspective suggests that maybe the focus on international achievements and the associated fanfare can sometimes feel disconnected from or even overshadow urgent domestic priorities. It highlights that inherent tension any government faces balancing foreign policy ambitions with domestic needs.
It's a crucial point for context. The material also briefly touched on Prime Minister Modi's personal narrative playing a role.
Yes, mentions of his background, his journey, the Chaiwala to PM story, his emphasis on a simpler lifestyle, even reports of him declining honorary degrees in the past. This all seems to contribute to a distinct personal brand. And that brand, combined with high approval ratings often cited, likely shapes how both domestic and international audiences perceive these honors and his global engagements. It adds another layer to the story.
And briefly, what about criticisms of this trend itself? Are these awards always seen positively?
Well, the material does note some critical viewpoints, which we should mention impartially. Some observers view these awards as, largely symbolic diplomatic niceties, part of the standard toolkit of international relations rather than deep substantive shifts.
Just part of the diplomatic game, so to speak.
That's one view. Others, echoing the point we just discussed, feel the time and resources spent on global tours and ceremonies could be better used addressing domestic issues. And some critics simply see the sheer volume and the publicity around the awards as perhaps excessive political signaling. These are all perspectives that exist alongside the narrative of rising global stature.
Understood. So looking forward, does this trend seem set to continue?
All indications are yes. The material noted his recent trip right around the time of the Cyprus Award, a three-nation tour, including the G7 summit outreach in Italy, then Canada, then Croatia.
So the diplomatic pace isn't slowing down.
Doesn't seem like it. These trips continued focus on building partnerships across various fields, trade corridors like IMEC, cooperation on AI, renewable energy, defense. The pursuit of strengthening India's global network remains very active.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've explored this really unprecedented run of international honors, 28 top awards for Prime Minister Modi in less than a decade. We've looked at the sheer global spread from Afghanistan to France, the U.S. to Papua New Guinea, Cyprus most recently.
And we've dug into the why behind it. A combination, it seems, of India's undeniable rise as a global player, specific policy initiatives gaining traction internationally, a proactive and often personalized diplomatic style, and the strategic calculations of countries wanting to align with a major power.
It paints a complex picture, doesn't it? One that reflects both an individual leader's approach and, perhaps more profoundly, a nation actively reshaping its role and image in the world.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. Beyond the count, beyond the ceremonies, what's the real resonance of this global recognition? How does it, or doesn't it, connect back to the lives of 1.4 billion people? Is there an inherent tension between seeking global influence and addressing domestic challenges, or can they be mutually reinforcing? What does this particular stream of global accolades really tell you about the intersection of India's international journey and its internal realities today?
Fascinating questions. It's definitely a significant trend reflecting India's current trajectory on the world stage, and it's certainly something we'll continue to watch closely.